Welcome to Introduction to Comparative Politics, video number 1, where we go over some important key terms so that we're on the same page when it comes to talking about the application of the comparative method to the study of politics. So again, to start, the study of comparative politics really has to do with using comparison to make causal claims. We use comparison in a pretty formal way. We use it in this in terms of the comparative method. So let's start with defining politics, scarcity, power, government, state, sovereignty, and finally the comparative method. Videos 2 and 3 will go through two different variations of the comparative method, the first being using induction and the second using deduction. So let us begin. Defined, politics has to do with the distribution of scarce resources and how you can and cannot behave in public. That's pretty important, so let's write that down. So politics has to do with the distribution of scarce resources and how you can and cannot behave in public. Let's define scarcity. So that's this term here. So a good is said to be scarce if it were free, there would not be enough of it to go around. For example, air is not scarce, as it's a free good, but, generally speaking, there's enough of it to go around. Petroleum, on the other hand, if it were free, there would not be enough of it to go around. So, quickly defined, scarcity is, or a good is said to be scarce if a good is scarce if it were free, there would not be enough of it to go around. Okay. There's another component of politics that's emphasized in your text. So again, your text is Shively, Power, and Choice. This semester we're using edition 13. And the second component of politics that I wanted to emphasize was the making of common decisions for a group of people where some people exercise power over other people. This is the component of politics that's emphasized in your book. It's pretty important, so again, let's write that down. So the second component of politics has to do with the making of common decisions for a group of people where some people exercise power over others. So the making of common decisions for a group of people where some people exercise power over others. That says exercise. Apologies that it's slightly messy. It's hard writing on this tablet. Let's define power. Power is a relatively simple concept. It's just the ability of person A to make person B do what person A wishes. While beyond the scope of this video, there are several ways of exercising power. For example, one can make another person do what they wish through persuasion, through coercion, through aligning incentives. This is something that we're going to talk about in greater detail when we talk in depth about Shively Chapter 1. But very quickly, power is just the ability of person A to make person B do what person A wants. And again, this is related to our topic of interest because politics is about the making of common decisions for a group of people where some people exercise power over other people. Politics is also concerned with decisions by the government that are authoritative. So I suppose this is the third component of politics. It's concerned with decisions by the government that are authoritative. And by authoritative, I just mean decisions by the government that have legitimacy. So legitimacy is, or authority is, a closely related concept to power. Power, however, does not always have to be legitimate. Authoritative power, however, is. So I will write legitimacy here in the parentheses. Politics has to do with decisions by the government that are authoritative. Government. So government is a pretty important term. To that effect, let's take a quick moment to identify some important components of what I mean by government. What I really mean is those people that are exercising power. In the state. The government controls this concept called the state. So the state is actually very important. Let's do another bullet point here and say the government, or those who have the power and that are exercising it legitimately in order to control the state. So the government controls the state. I outlined state once before, and that's because it's another one of our key terms. We're going to say the state is the entity responsible for doing a variety of things. The entity responsible for, so states do things like regulate markets, protect private property, provide public goods, and deal with unemployment. So let's write some of that down. Regulating markets, protecting private property, I already said regulating markets. Providing public goods, so providing public goods, and dealing with unemployment. The most important aspect of what makes a state is that it's a political unit with this concept that we call sovereignty. So states are political entities with sovereignty. So is a political unit with sovereignty. And sovereignty, again, is a very important key term. To that effect, let's define sovereignty. Sovereignty is simply ultimate control over what happens within the borders of one's own state. So ultimate control over what happens domestically. So to review, we've talked a little bit about politics, scarcity, power, government, the state, decisions that are authoritative, as well as the concept of sovereignty. This is what makes up the bulk of what we are going to be discussing in detail this semester. Again, we are in an Introduction to Comparative Politics class where we are using the comparative method to understand the subject matter of politics. What we've just done is gone through some very quick definitions of key terms related to politics, or the distribution of scarce resources, how you can and can't behave in public, and the making of common decisions for a group of people where some people exercise power over other people. There's one last critical component that I have not yet defined in this video, and that component is the comparative method. So the comparative method is a method of inquiry that relies on 3 simple steps. The first step is you start with either inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning. To formulate the second step of a testable hypothesis. The third step, and the most critical step of the comparative method that actually makes the comparative method different from the methods that you would employ in, say, something like natural science, is that you test the hypothesis using data that already exists in the real world. So we're going to say test hypothesis using existing data. This is the third step and the most important step for the comparative method. It's actually what makes the comparative method the comparative method. So we'll just say this is step number 3. Hypothesis formation is step number 2. And starting with either inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning would be step number 1. It's pretty important to be clear about what I mean by inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning. You're probably most familiar with deductive reasoning in the context of game theory, which is the study of strategic interactions, where you make a series of simplifying assumptions and then you make predictions that are consistent with those assumptions. In this instance, you have your theory that comes lexically prior to your observations. Induction is the opposite, where your observations precede theory. We will do examples of both deductive reasoning in the comparative method as well as inductive reasoning in the comparative method in the next 2 videos.